Good afternoon or good evening, depending where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Wednesday, December the 30th, 2020. Let's start today with Republican Senator Josh Hawley. And I've been accused of needlessly white pilling. It is now one day from the last day of the year. And of course, President Trump has not election. I should point out that YouTube has decreed that Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. Won the election on November the 3rd, fair and square, that he occupies the office of president-elect. Anyone who carries on to the contrary is a conspiracy theorist and is guilty of pushing misinformation. But I will continue to report on this extraordinary situation the United States of America finds itself in. Nothing like this has happened since 1876. This is from the Daily Mail. Josh Hawley announced Wednesday he would join GOP House members and object to Electoral College vote counts when Congress meets January 6th to finalize President-elect Joe Biden's win. I'll just jump in here to say that it has been reported that Vice President Mike Pence, who counts the electoral votes, had a holiday scheduled, or a trip rather, that he was to leave Washington January the 6th. It's been reported by Gateway Pundit that that trip has now been canceled. But back to the Mail. President Donald Trump has been pressuring GOP senators to join the effort, which could delay announcing the final result for hours. January 6th, see you in D.C., he tweeted to supporters Wednesday after Hawley's announcement as he's called on them to rally as Congress meets. Hawley said in a statement that he believes states, pointing a finger at Pennsylvania, failed to follow their own election laws, and companies like Twitter and Facebook interfered in the election by supporting Biden. Here's his full statement. Following both the 2004 and 2016 elections, Democrats in Congress objected during the certification of electoral votes in order to raise concerns about election integrity. They were praised by Democratic leadership and the media when they did, and they were entitled to do so. But now those of us concerned about the integrity of this election are entitled to do the same. I cannot vote to certify the Electoral College results on January 6th without raising the fact that some states, particularly Pennsylvania, failed to follow their own state election laws. And I cannot vote to certify without pointing out the unprecedented effort of mega corporations, including Facebook and Twitter, to interfere in this election in support of Joe Biden. At the very least, Congress should investigate allegations of voter fraud and adopt measures to secure the integrity of our elections. But Congress has so far failed to act. For these reasons, I will follow the same practice Democrat members of Congress have in years past and object during the certification process on January 6th to raise these critical issues. He also blasted Congress for refusing to investigate allegations of voter fraud. Later, he told reporters he didn't know if he'd object to just one state's tally or all of them. You know, we'll see about that. We're working out the logistics of it. We'll keep you posted, he said. Next Wednesday, Vice President Pence will preside over a meeting of Congress when the results of the Electoral College vote are read and tallied. It's generally a formality. In order for challenges to be debated, both a House member and a senator have to sign on to an objection. House Democrats raised concern after the 2016 race over state tallies in Alabama, Florida, Michigan, Texas, Mississippi, and the Carolinas. However, no Democratic senator joined the effort. Biden, at the time serving as vice president, gavelled down the protests because they weren't joined by a senator. In the 2004 cycle, then California Senator Barbara Boxer objected alongside several House Democrats to Ohio's results, citing, quote, numerous serious election irregularities that led to a significant disenfranchisement of voters, unquote. At the time, CNN reported that the Democrats made their move to gain support for future election reform, not because they thought it would actually overturn the results of the election, which was won by Republican President George W. Bush. Unlike Trump, who will applaud the effort, John Kerry, the 2004 Democratic nominee, put out a statement saying he would not take part in the protest. Prior to Hawley's announcement, Trump had been pressuring incoming Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville to register objections on January the 6th. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell asked senators not to engage because they'd be forced to go on the record, and by voting in favor of Biden's win, could be in danger of being taken down by the pro-Trump forces within the Republican Party. On December 15th, the day after the Electoral College met, McConnell came on the Senate floor and congratulated Biden as president-elect. Speaking to reporters at her weekly press conference, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi responded to Hawley's announcement by pointing out it wouldn't change the election's outcome. And we have more from Senator Hawley today, again from the Daily Mail, and this is pretty funny. And I guess it's part of what people are calling the Great Realignment. The Democrats were the anti-corporate power party for decades, and the Republicans were the pro-corporate power party. But this appears to be shifting. Calls to boycott Walmart grew on Wednesday after a member of its social media team went rogue and trolled a powerful Republican senator for saying he would challenge President-elect Joe Biden's victory. The official Twitter account of the world's largest retailer trolled Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri after he became the first member of the upper chamber to voice his support for contesting the Electoral College vote. Hawley, a junior senator who was first elected in 2018, said that some states, particularly Pennsylvania, failed to follow their own state election laws. And for these reasons, I will follow the same Democrat members of Congress, as I said previously. Hawley did not provide any evidence for his claims. Yes, it's pretty amusing from the Daily Mail, because this was brought to the Supreme Court before the election, because the state electoral officials in Pennsylvania decided to ignore their electoral laws regarding how long that they would accept mail-in ballots for, and the question of post-marking. They would have needed, I believe, a constitutional amendment to change the law, but they did not do this. Back to the Mail. Shockingly, the Twitter handle run by Walmart, the Arkansas-based retailer worth more than $408 billion, responded to Hawley, writing, "Go ahead, get your 2-hour debate." The tweet ended with the hashtag "sore loser." It was later removed. Walmart released a statement on its Twitter account apologizing to Hawley. In the tweet, which was directly addressed to Hawley's Twitter handle, the company said, quote, "The tweet published earlier was mistakenly posted by a member of our social media team. We deleted the post and have no intention of commenting on the subject of certifying the Electoral College. We apologize to Senator Hawley for this error and any confusion about our position," unquote. Hawley shot back on Twitter to the original tweet, since removed. "Thanks, Walmart, for your insulting condescension. Now that you've insulted 75 million Americans, will you at least apologize for using slave labor?" And there was a further tweet from Senator Hawley. "Or maybe you would like to apologize for the pathetic wages you pay your workers as you drive mom and pop stores out of business." Slave labor wages, which are topped up by various federal programs, which Walmart lets its new employees know all about. So that is to say, American taxpayers are subsidizing the low prices that Walmart offers. Of course, they're also pretty much putting money directly into Walmart's pocket. Hawley's swipe at Walmart is a reference to the company's controversial business practices, which critics say include paying extremely low wages to employees and importing low-cost products from China. Within hours of the dust-up, the boycott Walmart hashtag was trending on Twitter as angry supporters of President Trump cited the company's long-standing ties to China. One Twitter user slammed Walmart for its cheap Chinese products and blamed it for Main Street being murdered because big business is in bed with China, not Americans. Trump's opponents, meanwhile, claimed that Republicans have long ignored Walmart's controversial business practices until its Twitter account took aim at Hawley. The culture that hates cancel culture has boycott Walmart trending because their fees are hurt, tweeted one Twitter user. Again, all this very amusing indeed. Let's see, anything happening in the chat? I'm at Kelly's Earth. Good evening to you and to Walrus Libertarian. Chogokin666, I wished Mitch McConnell something bad, and my Twitter account got locked for abuse. Well, I'm not going to repeat it. Adam says this latest realignment demonstrates what a farce the two-party system is. Well, it would appear that the highest loyalty of Americans' two-party system as currently constituted is, in fact, to, China, the People's Republic of China, and, of course, to big tech and Silicon Valley. Neither of these settings are very good. Hang on, just let's see what I can do with this. That's rather blinding, actually. What happens if I push it back a bit? Is that any better? Yeah, that's somewhat better. Okay, liberals defending Walmart. Look, they're going to defend where their campaign contributions come from. There's no other way of looking at this. And look at the Democratic Party. Look at the contributions for its two senatorial candidates in Georgia. They are coming overwhelmingly not from the state of Georgia, but from the state of California, which is the headquarters of big tech, and it's the headquarters of Hollywood. Yeah, hang on a sec here. Hang on, just hang on. Yes, I normally have the overhead light on, which I neglected to do today. So that is an improvement there. Thank you, Metal Mike. So the battle over the stimulus check goes on. This is from Politico here. And there's Mitch McConnell, a picture of him. Is he wearing two masks as Kamala Harris did when she got her vaccine jab the other day? Burgess Everett, Politico writes, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell attacked the House-passed bill increasing stimulus checks to $2,000 on Wednesday afternoon, likely dooming the prospects of boosting direct payments as the 116th Congress came to an end. The Kentucky Republican said the House's proposal is too generous for high earners. Oh, I see. Mitch McConnell is now worried about high earners, is he? And does not align with what President Trump has suggested, which has no realistic path to quickly pass the Senate. McConnell said that he will not split up a bill combining the checks with an election fraud commission and a rollback of legal protections for big tech, which he introduced on Tuesday. The Senate will consider only smart targeted aid, not another fire hose of borrowed money that encompasses other people who are doing just fine. Of course, Mitch McConnell has no problem with the American government borrowing many, many billions to give to foreigners. McConnell continued, the Senate is not going to split apart the three issues that President Trump linked together just because Democrats are afraid to address two of them. Democrats have rejected the Election Fraud Commission and revoking the Section 230 liability protections for tech companies. After McConnell's remarks, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer asked to bring up the House-passed bill that boosts the checks to $2,000. McConnell objected. When Trump signed a $900 billion stimulus bill providing $600 checks on Sunday, he said he wanted Congress to address election fraud, tech companies' legal protections, and the larger checks, but Trump did not exactly say that they should be tied together. But he had more to say about this later on, as we shall see. And I got a new trackball today. Oddly enough, I seem to be having the same problem with it not working as I did earlier this week, which is a mystery. But let's go on to a tweet here. Okay, here we go. This is from Dave Pinson. Trump. Robert Verbruggen had tweeted, "Cocaine Mitch is going to win national hero because conservatives are just so much against deficit spending." What a farce this is. You remember the budget battles under Obama? And it always came to the same thing, that the Democrats were asked to cut entitlement spending, and they said no. Republicans should cut military spending, and the Republicans said no. So both of them were funded or increased because this is the iron triangle, apparently. Pinson also said there's literally no compelling reason for Trump supporters to vote for Senator Loeffler or Purdue Senate at this point. And it has been suggested, perhaps by Dave Pinson, that unless McConnell caves on this, Trump should withdraw his endorsement of Loeffler and Purdue. Because if he did, then the Republicans would lose control of the Senate, and Mitch McConnell would no longer be the Senate majority leader, and there'd really be no point in him sticking around, would there? Let's see. This is from the Gateway Pundit. Missouri Senator Josh Hawley announced Wednesday that he will object to the Electoral College certification process January the 6th, the first Republican senator to do so. We hear there will be more who will join him. Following the news this morning, Republican-elect Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted out that the word on the Hill is that GOP Senate Leader Mitch McConnell is working together with Democrat Speaker Nancy Pelosi on a rules-based change deal to block Electoral College certification objection. So far, over 30 Republican representatives and Senator Hawley have confirmed they will challenge the Electoral College count next week. The Gateway Pundit says the election was stolen, and I guess I must point out again that this is misinformation because Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. won the election fair and square on November the 30th. Joe Hoft of Gateway Pundit continues, if you are a Republican lawmaker and do not make a stand, your days in office are numbered. Well, I guess those that were elected this year in the House, they have 2 years, and those who are elected in the Senate, they have 6 years. But no, if Mitch McConnell and others, particularly Senator Ben Sasse, think that Trumpism is going anywhere anytime soon, I believe that they are sorely mistaken. And again, this is really irrelevant because it doesn't really matter if it were demonstrated beyond a reasonable doubt that, 10, 20, 30 million votes were illegal. The fact remains that Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. was elected president on November the 3rd. It wouldn't really matter if 100% of the votes were illegal. It doesn't change anything. That's the world that we live in, at least according to the Democratic Party and the mainstream media. Again, from a Gateway Pundit and Joe Hoff, inventor Jovan Hutton Pulitzer was in front of the Georgia Senate today, and he totally destroyed Georgia's 2020 election results and offered a plan where, for free, he will determine the accurate results by examining the paper ballots used in the election. Prior to today, we've requested that President Trump write an executive order mandating that the ballots and images in select states be audited and reviewed for fraud by Jovan Pulitzer. We first learned of Pulitzer a few weeks ago and reported that he is able to audit millions of ballots in a day based on his method for reviewing ballots and images. He believes that there was fraud in the 2020 election, which of course there was not. And even if there was, it was minor and does not affect the result, and that he can prove it quickly. And apparently he did so, that he hacked a machine, a Dominion machine, which was for some reason connected to the internet. Now, how this can possibly be allowed is a fascinating question. These voting machines, they have to be. If there's going to be any pretense of fairness, they have to be closed systems. They have to be dumb terminals. But there are claims again and again that they are not closed systems, that they are in fact smart terminals, which is a bit of a head scratcher, I must say. Let's go to, President Trump. 17 hours ago, he tweeted, new lot study estimates 11,350 absentee votes lost to Trump in Georgia, another 289,000 excess of fraudulent votes across Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And let's catch up on his feed 2 hours ago. We now have far more votes than needed to flip Georgia in the presidential race. Massive voter fraud took place. Thank you to the Georgia legislature for today's revealing meeting. And again, as Twitter points out, quite rightfully, this claim about election fraud is disputed. Well, more than disputed, in fact. More from Trump. Governor Kemp, his puppet, Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, and Secretary of State are disasters for Georgia. Won't let professionals get anywhere near Fulton County for signature verifications or anything else. They are virtually controlled by Stacey Abrams and the Democrats. Fools. I'll point out that after the 2018 midterms, Stacey Abrams, who apparently is the ominous grise of Georgia politics, insisted for months afterwards that the vote had been stolen, that it was illegal, and that she was the rightful governor of Georgia. So it's a rather curious situation that when the other side makes claims about similar claims about the 2020 election, well, they're daft, crazy, evil, evidence of a coup. Trump also tweeted, watching Fox News is almost as bad as watching fake news CNN. New alternatives are developing. 4 hours ago, the United States had more votes than it had people voting by a lot. This travesty cannot be allowed to stand. It was a rigged election, not one even fit for third world countries. Again, that is President Trump's opinion. And Twitter points out this claim about election fraud is disputed. 5 hours ago, Twitter is shadow banning like never before. A disgrace that our weak and ineffective political leadership refuses to do anything about big tech. They're either afraid or stupid. Nobody really knows. And 10 hours ago, Team Trump gave phone numbers for people to call, to contact state legislatures in Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Arizona. And finally, 11 hours ago, $2,000 ASAP, Trump tweeted. So I guess the view of Mitch McConnell and others in the Republican Party is that, well, it's going to be 2 years till another election, and people will simply forget that the Republican Party stood in the way of them getting $2,000 checks rather than $600 checks, even as measures taken by state governments have wrecked the economies of many states. I want to talk about Matt Stoller now, who's the author of the book Goliath, which I reviewed some months ago on the book club. He is an anti-monopolist. He describes it thus, my book Goliath, the 100-year war between monopoly power and democracy, wherein Americans once challenged corporate power, but the 1970s Watergate baby generation rejected this tradition, embraced monopoly, and destabilized politics. Here's a good one from Matt Stoller. Republicans are insincere fake populists, he said, while gesturing to the waiter at French Laundry, which is, of course, a reference to the scandal, which was largely hushed up by the media. Whereas Governor Newsom of California, who has instituted the strictest lockdown of the United States, was caught dining with, I believe, 11 other people at an $800 a plate restaurant called the French Laundry. They were neither wearing masks nor following social distancing. Congressman Ken Buck, who is a member of the Republican Party, had tweeted, and this was retweeted by Matt Stoller, "Big tech in the White House is a bad idea. We must take action against Google and Facebook for their anti-competitive practices. Now is not the time to cozy up to big tech." This is a response to a tweet from Alex Thompson of Politico, who had said Biden's new staff secretary is Jessica Hertz. Earlier this year, she was at Facebook and helped them navigate the Cambridge Analytica settlement. Her role there has been sometimes at odds with the Biden campaign's anti-Facebook rhetoric. Thomas Friedman had tweeted, "We need to take care of Americans hurting because of COVID-19. We need to buttress our cities that are running out of money." And why are they running out of money, Tom Friedman? "We need to invest in infrastructure, but a $2,000 untargeted giveaway, in many cases to people who don't need the help, is crazy. Can we stop and think?" Stoller responds, "This person has tenure at the New York Times op-ed page and is married to a billionaire." Yes, and Stoller has made some claims regarding Section 230. Oh, that Section 230 is going to wreck Silicon Valley. Was Silicon Valley in a terrible place before the rise of social media? Before Twitter and Facebook and Google, for that matter, became the primary sources of news, for Americans? Stoller does not believe that Section 230 is going to destroy Facebook and others. And his satirical comment on this situation: "Rich, powerful corporations abuse the law, so we shouldn't have law. I am very smart." Let's see. Why not sunset Section 230 so it ends in 2 years? Then everyone have a strong incentive to do that. 230 reform they've all been yammering about endlessly. It feels weird to say this, but Pelosi and the Democrats have played the $2,000 check situation quite well. The pressure is on McConnell to cave or possibly lose his Senate majority. Use it or lose it. And he has a post here on Substack, which is from September, that he talked about with regard to Section 230. And again, the sky is falling by the tech companies as they accrue record profits. He writes, "The desire to argue through the political lens of free speech is further heightened by the biggest magnetic attention drawn in the world, Donald Trump. A few months ago, Trump argued that large technology platforms organize themselves by censoring conservative speech. He issued an executive order mandating the government see what it could do to hold tech platforms accountable for controlling speech. Specifically, Trump ordered the Federal Communications Commission to make regulatory changes to a law called Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which is a shield useful to large technology platforms, as well as services like Grindr. The law is conceptually simple. Section 230 was passed in 1996 to protect the ability of AOL and CompuServe to run chat rooms without having to be responsible for what other people use them for. The law basically ensured that if a user said something defamatory on AOL's chat room, the user, not AOL, would be liable. And whether AOL choose to take it down, filter content in a specific way, or keep it up, AOL would be protected by a Good Samaritan clause, which says it is allowed to run its service however it wants, and it is never responsible for what third-party speakers say. That's why Google can display whatever search results or ads it wants, or Facebook can organize its algorithm however it wants, and neither corporation can be sued for third-party content. Mark Zuckerberg may tell the public he's responsible for what happens on Facebook, but the law says he isn't." Stoller continues, "Section 230 is understood as the legal cornerstone of digital platforms. There's even a book called The 26 Words That Created the Internet, because the key section is just 26 words long. No provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. So when Trump attacked Section 230 with his executive order, tech lobbyists went nuts. But protectors of Section 230 extend far beyond the big tech lobbying world. The American Civil Liberties Union supports Section 230. So does the liberal group Common Cause, an organization created during the Nixon administration to take on that corrupt president. Interestingly, free speech in Section 230 was also Grindr's defense to a lawsuit. I cannot imagine how advertising for instant homosexual services close to you can constitute free speech. But there you have it. Grindr argued that it's merely a speech platform, or in Section 230 parlance, an interactive computer service. And if someone used Grindr to put Herrick, the fellow who sued, in danger, well, it's not Grindr's fault. The district court, however, did not agree with the so-called exploding toaster theory. In fact, as Stoller argues, Section 230 has become the shield for swaths of corrupt activities. Facebook can't be held liable for enabling. In other words, Section 230 and the law governing the structuring of platforms on the internet creates a very weird kind of politics. In some ways, it puts victims' rights lawyers and Trump on the same side against liberal groups and big tech monopolies, although the debate is, in fact, much more scrambled. And, well, let's see. Under Section 230, the tech companies, such as Facebook, Twitter, et al., and Grindr even, are seen as platforms, not publishers. But as been pointed out many times, all of these so-called platforms are now publishing. Every time Twitter, for instance, says that this claim about election fraud is disputed, or that Joe Biden is the president come what may, they are publishing. Twitter has now for several months led off with, oh, what does this story? I don't see how the argument in favor of Section 230 has any merit whatsoever. It strikes me simply as a means thereby the big tech companies get richer and richer and more powerful and free from any kind of interference or regulation. They can do whatever the hell they want. And, well, it's the law that you can't do anything about it. Because, I don't know what, big tech is the guarantor of America. Vox Day, I mentioned this earlier, Joe Van Pulitzer just now hacked into a Fulton County voting machine that is being used in the Georgia runoff, and it is connected to the internet. He established two-way communication from a polling pad in a voting center. He's telling the Georgia Senate about it right now. I guess it's just one of those anomalies. You know, weird things happen. The fact that Dominion voting machines are connected to the internet and can be accessed remotely, it's nothing to be upset about there. Just look away. Nothing happening here. Let's see if anything is happening in the chat. Happy New Year, KMG. We're not quite there yet, but I appreciate the sentiment. I've never seen Michael Clayton. 2 cents. A mascot would be nice. Maybe a Garfield cat, says Glibmed. Derivative mask. Yeah, which I believe is common to a great many powerful American legislators recent years. That he has a strong influence, his thinking and his voting. And just again, let me confirm this. Wow, got to scroll down a long way here. Scroll down a long way. Under personal life, to her from 1968 to 1980. His second wife, whom he married in 1993, is Elaine Chao, Secretary of Labor under President George W. Bush and Secretary of Transportation under Donald Trump. Elaine Chao. And she was born in Taipei, Taiwan. Yeah, how about that? How about that? And her father, a Chinese businessman. I suppose it would be xenophobic or worse to suggest that there's, any kind of connection there. But I think that Americans are becoming rather suspicious about this. Let's see what is happening at, actually, I interrupted myself. Pearl's letting agency says pyramid scheme is unraveling. Chogokin 666. Fiscal conservatism. Look, it's rubbish. It's complete rubbish. Commentary Magazine became the semi-official organ of the neoconservatives in the 1990s. And, well, the magazine went downhill in a hurry. It's been unreadable for, 20 years or so, especially since Pod Jr. Took over. In 1997, Commentary ran a piece by John Lott and William Bennett saying enough with balanced budgets, okay? Because what's important is how the money is used, how the power is used. And so there it was, official, that all this talk about balancing budgets and fiscal conservatism is just absolute nonsense. Nobody believes in it. Democrats don't believe in it. Republicans, well, Rand Paul, I guess, maybe he's the last federal legislator in America to care about it. Metal Mike says the GOP has never been interested in fiscal conservatism. They are quite happy to balloon the debt by excessive military spending, which was a point I made about 10 years ago. Georgia is looking questionable, though, says Alex Dillard. Just looks questionable since they stopped counting the ballots with all those other states. Hello to Polygons. Who says, I love how fiscal conservatives never question when billions go to foreigners, global corporations, meanwhile raise hell when any money goes to actual Americans. Well, I guess these foreign countries and these global corporations are powerful, whereas average Americans are not. They're not. Polygons says liberals love licking corporate boots so long as they change their Twitter avatar to the sodomy flag and their CEO talks about black bodies. Yes, I've talked about this for quite a few years now. This coalition between big government and big business. Here's the deal. Big government gets the support of big business. Big business previously in the past was actually fairly conservative. It hasn't been for some time. So all of the initiatives pushed forward by big government, particularly in terms of social revolution, are praised and demanded. Always more extensions demanded by big business. So what does big business get? Big business gets unlimited power, and they get to break the law routinely, as, say, the Bank of America does, without being punished, not criminally punished. They just pay fines. J.P. Morgan paid over $10 billion in fines in recent years. That HSBC was found, the Department of Justice found that it was laundering money for Mexican cartels and doing similar things for the government of Iran, the latter of which is classified officially by the U.S. government as terrorism. But Eric Holder, the very woke Attorney General under Obama, said, no, I've decided there is not going to be a criminal prosecution because this would impugn confidence in financial institutions, which would impugn confidence in, well, everything. So not going to do it. John S. says, celebrity chef and recent suicide, Anthony Bourdain was a French laundry chef. Okay, let's see. Aoyaka Raipala, hello to our Finnish friend. I can see why they set up these protections. Just where would we be as a civilization without Grindr? Well, I remember that Craigslist got into a lot of trouble because people were making homosexual assignations on Craigslist, which would lead to murder. And I believe Craigslist dropped this, if I'm not mistaken. If I'm mistaken, please correct me in the chat. I worked with a fellow at Coco in San Diego, and he later translated to New York City, where he arranged a hookup with a man on Craigslist, and he was robbed and beaten to death. Curiously, there were two people that I worked with at Cogo in San Diego who were murdered by homosexual prostitutes. Maybe Chow is a fan of Chiang Kai-shek, says Emmett Kell's Earth. Perhaps. Glib Medley says Weekly Standard originally tried a China stance before 9/11. Absolutely right, and it was rather packed countries. Peace dividend, right? No. No, the neocons weren't having any of that, and they pushed the idea of a war against China, and that didn't go any. Started pushing the idea of a war against every Muslim country thing. So they started talking about Islamists and radical Islam. Very amusing. And even while they were pushing that, they started pushing a war against Russia. And we'll see where that goes, assuming that Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. assumes the office of the presidency on January the 20th. Okay, and let's get back to it here. Let's see if there's anything new from Breitbart. Here we go. This is loading so slowly. Oh, watch. Democrat John Ossoff promises illegal aliens amnesty at a Latinx meet and greet. Governor Ron DeSantis refuses to get vaccine before vulnerable populations. I'm an elected official, but whoop-de-doo. USA Today, Raphael Warnock's call for America to repent for worship of whiteness. Yeah, because that's what America is doing now. It's worshiping whiteness. Representative Michael Waltz, a Republican of Florida, said if Democrats win Georgia, they will nationalize lockdowns. That would be pretty amusing. Is Joe Biden going to send out an airborne division and seize Tallahassee? Is that what's going to happen? I don't think so. It would be interesting. No question about it. There's a piece from American Thinker by Ron Wright, a call to arms for all patriots to come to the aid of their party. He begins, our founders were visionary and provided ways to resolve a disputed presidential election. Constitutional law expert attorney Jenna Ellis, a Trump legal team member, outlined this procedure. The most straightforward solution is for the 6 contested states' legislatures to convene on their initiative by simple majority vote without being called into session by a reluctant governor. Then by a resolution by a simple majority vote, reclaim their state's electors pledged for Biden and appoint electors for Trump. Patriots in the contested states should immediately deluge by phone, fax, and email their representatives to demand the retraction of the electors pledged to Biden. Warn the representatives that there are 74 million disenfranchised voters who voted for Trump who are not going away. Come back with your shield or on it. While not yet time for pitchforks and shovels, this has been done before. Shortly after World War II, Tennessee citizens faced a similar vote fraud by a corrupt government in McMinn County, the Battle of Athens, it was called. November 3rd, a new day of infamy, a devious covert attack shook the United States of America to its core. This attack was worse than Pearl Harbor or 9/11. The perpetrators were our elitist aristocracy and political class that reject the concept of self-government by we the people. Complicit were our unelected administrative state. the deep state, the mainstream media, big tech, the New World Order, globalists, and with their Great Reset, and hostile foreign governments, specifically China. This evil coalition seeks to subvert the people's will by undermining our core belief, sovereignty, and overthrowing our government as created by our founders. As President Lincoln said, a house divided itself cannot stand. And he concludes, at stake is whether our country survives as a constitutional republic from this covert, insidious attack, both from within by the aid and comfort from elected and unelected officials and others owing allegiance to the United States, and by the assistance of hostile foreign governments and the New World Order. As Benjamin Franklin said, our government is a republic if you can keep it. As explained by Richard Berman, democratic republics are not merely founded upon the consent of the people for their continued good health. We must preserve the rule of law and put an end to this unequal system of justice. Rules for thee, but not for me. As John Adams said, we are a government of laws, not of men. Well, that has been debatable for quite some time. No question about that. We'll see how long that lasts, or how long any kind of claim can be made that condition, laws not of men, still obtains. Because it's been a close-run thing for quite some time, especially when the 9 black-robed unelected critarchs of the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice, when the so-called check stop, which is that police set up roadblocks and simply test everyone for being over the legal limit of alcohol consumption. This is obviously an illegal. The Constitution does protect against unreasonable search and seizure, but drink driving is very bad indeed. It kills people. So I'm going to rule that the police anywhere in the United States can simply stop whoever they like. And we're going to move on now to, and wait for it. Let's see if Scott Adams has anything new. Oh, yes, of course. I can't do it that way. Let's do it this way, which will just take about 5 seconds. Okay. And here we are. The Mr. Persuasion, Scott Adams, who seems to have taken a stand rather similar to mine in terms of, his support of Trump. That is to say, I guess he understands that there's certain things that one cannot say in the United States while being considered a respectable person, or perhaps even being able to earn a livelihood. And he's been pushing against that, the limits of that, for some time. Non-kinetic war with China, with whiteboard, stimulus checks, vaccinations, and perhaps he is feeling downhearted. I don't know. But let's see if there's anything new from him. And here it is. No, nothing since mocking Kamala Harris on December the 26th about her claim to have celebrated Kwanzaa for decades. What was I talking about yesterday? Oh, yes, that Jason Kenney's government in Alberta was criticized for not quoting religious scripture from Kwanzaa. I want to talk now about the Spanish Prisoner, which of course is the name of a famous con where you get the money and you rescue the girl. It is also the name of a movie written and directed by David Mamet, starring Kel Scott. So the question in the Hilaria Alec Baldwin imbroglio is, who is the Spanish prisoner? Is it Hilaria or is it Alec himself? From the Mail, the woman who started the debate about Hilaria Baldwin's Spanish roots has said that the influencer should own what she did. The woman who posts under the Twitter handle Lenny Briscoe said that the influencer and yoga teacher isn't coming clean despite posting videos to Instagram and doing an interview with the New York Times. Yes, I'm talking about this, but I'm just a guy who blabs on YouTube. The New York Times ran thousands of words about this. Briscoe, who herself is white, pretty problematic, and attended elite liberal arts college Vassar in New York, said that Baldwin was offensive and wrong to falsely claim she was from Spain because she was taking opportunities from people who really do have Hispanic roots. Hispanic is a linguistic category. It is not, in fact, a racial category or a tribal category, but never mind that. In her first interview, Briscoe told the Mail that she had few regrets and posted the tweet on December 21st out of boredom. Yes, boredom is a vastly underrated motivation in people's lives. Briscoe, who spoke on condition of anonymity, said people were asking me, don't you have anything better to do? And the answer is no, I don't. It's a pandemic, it's cold outside, and I don't celebrate Christmas. Baldwin and her husband, Alec, that's Ilaria and her husband, Alec. Again, this is not my mistake. I guess when you publish 1 million words a day, like the Daily Mail does, problems of, grammar, orthography, and the like aren't going to be particularly important. So Ilaria and Alec have spent their Christmas under intense scrutiny since Briscoe's tweet set off a firestorm on social media. The tweet read, "You have to admire Ilaria Baldwin's commitment to her decade-long grift where she impersonates a Spanish person." It was like 20,000 times and led to dozens of people finding examples of Baldwin using a Spanish accent, a jarring contrast to her childhood in Boston, where she was known as Hillary and considered white by her classmates. Briscoe, who lives in New York, said that she fired off the tweet because she is locked inside during the pandemic. She said, "It's offensive and wrong to pretend you're an immigrant and that you speak English as a second language and appropriate the actual experience that actual immigrant women have. That's not what happened." She made a post saying people at the park think she's the nanny because her kids are blonde and have blue eyes. That is something that happens to moms of color who actually have an accent. That is just the saddest story in the world, isn't it? That's offensive. These are hard experiences that people actually have, and she pretended. It's not really necessary. She could be a hot white influencer. Plenty of people do that. It's commonplace when you have, say, children who do not look like the parent who is with them, the mother or the father. People think, well, perhaps he's not really the father, say. But no, the sufferings of immigrant women and their problems with accents and their children's hair color, this is the most important thing. Briscoe said that Baldwin was taking up opportunities that should have been given to people who really do have Hispanic roots. We're talking about people from Spain here. And when Americans talk about Hispanics, they are generally talking about people from Central America first, and then South America, or perhaps the Caribbean. We're talking about people with a significant amount of Indian blood, Indio blood in them, not people from Spain who are white people through and through, although some of them are indeed dark. In her video, Baldwin admitted, "Yes, I am a white girl," while Alec filmed his own video berating critics and comparing Briscoe to a used bar coaster. Briscoe fired back on Twitter, "Did Alec Baldwin just call me basura, trash, and compare me to QAnon, sir? This is not that." She said the first couple of articles on NBC were very pro-Hillary, like Ilaria fires back. Just the tone seemed very corporate synergy, given Alec Baldwin is on NBC show 30 Rock. Well, that show went off the air some years ago. She said, Briscoe said, some people said I did it because I'm jealous and uglier. I don't care if I'm uglier. It seems like a lot of work to look like her. Meow. You know, we hear so much about the cruelty from men to women. It strikes me that, as a rule, women are far crueler to women than men are. Typically not violently cruel, but I'm sure some of you have seen the famous Seinfeld episode, which revolves around two Henry Miller novels, Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. And George is talking about being bullied in gym class by the other students and by the gym teacher, who called him "can't stand ya." And he reveals that he got a wedgie. And Elaine says, "You know, this is terrible." And Jerry says, "Well, don't women do something like that?" And Elaine says, "No, we just criticize them until they develop an eating disorder." Wow, this Briscoe woman is on fire. She kept up her running commentary on Twitter, at one point writing, "Please do not ask me to expose Meghan Markle. There is nothing to expose. It is already public information that her husband is a Nazi cosplayer that uses racial slurs." As long as we're talking about appropriating Hispanic or Latino heritage, how about Linda Ronstadt? She has been cosplaying as a Hispanic for what, over 20 years now, despite her German name. And I think I talked about this once on the show. She has a grandfather or a great grandfather who apparently is Mexican or part Mexican. That doesn't seem to be a very good claim to being Hispanic. Not a very good claim at all. But she has been allowed to get away with it. But we have Hilaria Baldwin simply cannot stop digging the hole she's in deeper. Again, from the Daily Mail, which is your first stop, the one-stop shop for Hilaria Baldwin news, wherein we learned that she has blamed the media for misrepresenting her as Spanish and said this is why people are now confused about her heritage, and claims she has done nothing wrong. That is a very serious error. If the media discovers something about you which is embarrassing, and without a question correct, you do not go after the media, particularly if you're a woman as privileged, presumably from cradle to grave, as Hillary, aka Hilaria Baldwin. Attempting to stem the backlash she's faced after being accused of a decade-long Spanish grift, the influencer and wife of Alec Baldwin has given an 80-minute cringeworthy interview with the New York Times to clarify her story. The influencer, whatever that might mean, doesn't that mean pimping out products on the internet for money? The influencer said she hid her Boston upbringing so as to protect her parents from media scrutiny after she began dating Baldwin, who she says has always known she is from New England. And she also attempts to explain away the now infamous Today cooking segment where she forgot the word for cucumber and claims it was because she was nervous on live TV. Indeed, she denies she is guilty of cultural appropriation and that she ever tried to pretend she was Spanish at any time. However, during the course of the interview, the mother of 5, 36, reveals yet more contradictions about her upbringing as she attempts to claim she has always been honest about being from Boston. And we've discovered now that she grew up in one of Boston's top neighborhoods and lived in a house that is valued at, $4 million. Her mother is a university medical professor, and her father is Well, another big shot, you know. They retired some years ago and moved to Mallorca, which perhaps gave Ilaria the idea that she was Spanish. Yes, Ilaria's mother and husband both worked as professors in the U.S. for years before retiring to Mallorca in 2011. Ilaria's father has even deeper ties to the U.S., having lived here since before the American Revolution. On Wednesday, the Daily Mail exclusively revealed that Ilaria grew up in a 100-year-old, $400 million house in the heart of the most desirable district in Boston. Her parents bought the 5-bed, 5-bath house on Pinckney Street in June 1987 when their daughter was just 3 years old. They didn't move out till she had turned 28, despite her claims of long periods of time spent in Spain. I don't know what she is talking about, said the family's former neighbor. She lived here since she was a child. She didn't call herself Ilaria then, just Hillary, and she certainly didn't speak with a Spanish accent. Once I was really upset with her and asked her to shut the gate to stop the dog getting out, and she just looked at me and said, "I've lived here for 19 years," and stormed away. She was a very entitled young lady. And there's a picture of their handsome house in the Beacon Hill neighborhood of Boston. I've been to Beacon Hill in Boston, and yes, it's a very exclusive neighborhood. According to the Mail, Beacon Hill is regularly praised as the best area to live in Boston, with its quaint, narrow cobblestone streets and gas lighting, and its closeness to both the Charles River and Boston Common. Former Secretary of State John Kerry lives a quarter mile from the house Ilaria grew up in, while Ghislaine Maxwell's husband Scott Borgerson's townhouse is even closer. Unlike most houses in Beacon Hill, Ilaria's childhood home is set back from the street behind its own brick-tiled courtyard. When they sold, Thomas, now 71, and Hayward, 64, Ilaria's parents, listed the white-painted house built in 1899 as a rare opportunity to live in a magnificent, private, single-family, 5-plus bedroom residence in Beacon Hill. Yes, a very desirable residence. Okay, let's get back to the chat here. Okay, well, I'm glad to see we have a lot of people in it today. And I go through headphones too easily. Go for the Ross $15 China stuff, says Quachu Lango. Okay. These are incredibly comfy. I wear them 10 hours a day and don't notice them, says Head McNeck. I don't know what headphones that he is referring to. I don't know. I'm not really keen on headphones for the reason that music should be listened to with the entire body, not merely the head. I know a lot of people use headphones to block out the world. I don't really think that's such a good idea. I mean, when you're on the streets, don't you want to hear what's going on? I see bicyclists, wearing headphones, and I'm thinking, this has to be dangerous. What if, there's an ambulance coming, or a fire engine, or the car honking a horn, the car that's about to, run over your bicycle, that sort of thing. The other problem I have with it is it encourages continuous music. And I don't think that that's a good idea, because I think that it leads to a lack of respect for it. Glib Medley loves Papaya King. Shogokin 666 KMG should mail us a one-time pad and broadcast the key via shortwave. Yes, I don't know. That may be coming, assuming that Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. Does indeed become president on January the 20th. Is the bit rate real bad, or is it just me, says Sharp Dole? Well, the bit rate is it's not good. I talked about this yesterday. On the weekend, I'm going to investigate all I can do to fix the transmission problems I've been having. If it's not possible to do it on this setup, then I will investigate alternative methods, perhaps using my smartphone and that system rather than using YouTube. This, in terms of the throughput that I'm getting, I can't do anything about that until I get a permanent residence, and then I can buy my internet connection from Shaw or a similar company. And Tricky Who says, gaslighting, how dare you? There's too much global warming. It's got to be ripped up and replaced with 5G LEDs. Okay. Quachalango says headphones are for oral samizdat. Okay, I can see that. Okay, and let's move on to a different subject. Oh, yes, there's something about the fashion industry. And as I have stated in the past, for our societies to survive, the fashion industry must be destroyed. Again, from the Mail, multiple male and trans models claim designer Alexander Wang, 37, drugged them with MDMA at parties before sexually assaulting them in a bombshell report. WWD, which used to be called Women's Wear Daily, are they just WWD now? Reported that several people accused him of being a sexual predator by drugging drinks and sexually assaulting them. The initial claims were posted on Instagram by industry watchdog Shit Model Management. Model Owen Mooney, who told his story on TikTok, because of course he did, claimed Wang had groped him at a crowded New York City club in 2017. I'm looking at a picture of Alexander Wang, and I thought, okay, yes, I recognize Naomi Campbell, and I recognize Janet Jackson. Who is this woman standing next to them? It turns out this is Alexander Wang, and I don't want to misgender this person, whatever that might be. How many decades has it been known for that the fashion industry now likes models in their teens, and these people get flown to places like Milan and Paris, and their parents don't come with them, and they are sexually molested by men or by women. The fashion industry is run, as I like to say, by feathery men and leathery women. And yeah, okay. Let's see. Wang, who is openly gay, is seen at the New York City Pride March on June the 24th, 2018. Oh, and he's wearing a pair of underwear that says, it's got a slogan on it, protect your Wang. Isn't that cute? Isn't that cute? And, okay, one more before we move on to the story of the year, which I'm sure everyone is sick to death of, that is to say COVID-19, but there's no escape, is there? There is no escape. And Bill Gates, who is the emperor, it would appear, or something close to it, says that no. You thought that 2021 was going to see a return to normality? No. Oh, I've noticed this in the last few days. It's very amusing. The black girl hair meme with typically it's some white girl versus a black girl, and it's all about black girls' hair. One of the most amusing that I've seen was some black girl saying something, and the white girl is saying, "You're wearing an 8-year-old Chinese girl's hair." And there is a cartoon here of a Sisyphean scene where a young black woman has an enormous head of hair, which is as big as her body, and she's pushing it up a cliff. And there's another one where the black girl is literally imprisoned by her hair. Dr. Professor Kashawagi Esquire tweeted, "This black girl hair take on big brain Wojak is great, not just because they can't stop talking about it, but also because black hair replacing a brain is the perfect allegory for contemporary discourse. And there are so many of these. I've been talking about this for quite some time. You know, it originally started with the claim by Black women that white women cannot stop touching their hair. And as soon as I heard this, I thought, well, this is obviously false for two reasons. One, people do not make a habit of touching strangers' hair. And secondly, the idea that white women would do this to Black women, given the, how would I say, strained state of racial relations in the West. And I suppose third, the most important reason, white people do not care about Black people's hair. They don't. They just don't. But this is a belief which has been memed into existence. Here's a story from The Blaze. The first truck transporting Pfizer-BioNTech's coronavirus vaccine pulled out of a Michigan manufacturing plant Sunday and is expected to reach its destination on Monday so that health workers can administer the vaccine. Despite the overall optimism in the COVID-19 vaccine on its way to the American people, Bill Gates warns that the coronavirus pandemic is not even close to being over, because of course it's not. Gates is impressed with the progress of the coronavirus vaccine thus far. This vaccine work is phenomenal, Gates said last week at Singapore's FinTech Festival that was held virtually. You know, we've been working with these pharma companies. Pharma companies, there's a shortage of money there, is a shortage of expertise, such that Bill Gates needs to put his oar in. They've been doing their best, you know, thank goodness those vaccines will bring this pandemic to an end. Gates noted that there could be 6 COVID-19 vaccines ready by spring of 2021 and expects them to be approved by summer 2021. However, despite his optimism in the coronavirus vaccine, that's a terribly written sentence. Gates said that the world would not return to normal for more than a year. By the summer of 2021, the rich countries will have more vaccine coverage than other countries. So the rich countries will be going mostly back to normal, Gates told the Hindustan Times. But I still think because the virus will be in the world, we will be somewhat conservative about large public events. We will still have some mask wearing. Malaria and other tropical diseases have been a problem, a serious problem. Well, since forever? We didn't have to wear masks because of malaria, say. But of course, COVID-19 is different from every other virus that has ever existed. We really need to get this virus eliminated almost everywhere, or else we have seen, even in countries that have done a super good job, like Australia or Singapore or Hong Kong or South Korea, they always run a risk of reinfection. So they've had to restrict tourism and other travel, but by summer, that will start to open up. They won't be totally back to normal, but sometime in the first half of 2022, I do think that we will be able to say that we're back to normal. Oh, and non-essential businesses, well, they're getting in the neck. Bars and restaurants in most of the country will be closed as we go into this wave, Gates told Jake Tapper on CNN. And I think, sadly, that's appropriate. Yes, as sad as a man who is worth, $50-60 billion can be. Depending on how severe it is, the decision about schools is much more complicated because there the benefits are pretty high. The amount of transmission is not the same as in restaurants and bars. We have data on this. Something like less than 2% of transmissions in New York City could be traced to bars and restaurants. Trade-offs will have to be made. And here's a trade-off that we're seeing, that Bill Gates gets ever richer and more powerful while the non-essentials continue to be hammered. That's a trade-off that he is certainly willing to make. Whether the rest of us will be willing to make that trade-off, for another year, another year and a half? Well, that remains to be seen, doesn't it? We have the governor of New Hampshire saying the swearing-in ceremony is not going to happen in public because people, armed men, have started showing up at his house and walking on his lawn because they are fed up with it. The precautionary principle. Precautionary principle is the reason why the world's economy must be destroyed, because it might be getting slightly warmer. Someone called Norman Swan, host of RN's Health Report, co-host of CoronaCast, and commentator on ABC TV's 7:30. That would be ABC TV, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation. He tweeted, "The Premier just said that New South Wales always acts on the precautionary principle. If so, on the basis of the numbers and locations, now is the time for a greater Sydney lockdown." I responded, if Premier Berejiklian really believes in the precautionary principle, she should forbid everyone from going outside permanently and force everyone to wear helmets inside permanently. You can't ever be too safe. Outside is a dangerous place. People die in all sorts of ways. Of course, people die indoors as well. Slipping in the shower, tripping and smacking their head at the edge of a table, some such. So as I say, if we really believe in the precautionary principle, we would force people to wear bicycle helmets all the time, even indoors. Private automobiles should obviously be banned under the precautionary principle. They kill tens of thousands of people. There's 6 million traffic accidents in the United States every year. So can we look forward to that? Of course, I'm sure Bill Gates would continue to have his private transportation up to and including, private jet, because he is somehow became the czar of vaccinations. I was happier with Bill Gates back when he merely wanted to have total control over the computer industry, not when, he's decided that he needs control over every aspect of our daily lives, because that is what we are talking about now. And I gather that in Australia, there is much talk about the precautionary principle. And let's see. So Dr. Chant says everyone should be staying indoors. 18 new cases, 6 in the inner west. Only 30 can now gather together outside. Yet the Sydney test, with thousands attending, will still be going on. Oh, dear. We can't have cricket. We can't have this. So cases are down in New South Wales, but testing is way down. Locations are increasing, and we're not canceling the fireworks or requiring that people wear masks. Yes, it's been a hard year, but surely we can endure what is the smallest sacrifice to ensure so much good. And I saw someone here saying that looking forward to a life governed by the precautionary principle. I don't know. Be careful what you wish for, as they say, because there's not much that can be done if the precautionary principle is put first. Precautionary principle, briefly, is that one should look to the worst possible result of anything and then work back from there. Worst possible result, though, according to whom? Because we hear so much about science and experts, but as it's turned out, despite the strenuous efforts of social media companies and just the old style media to suppress this, it turns out that we have dueling experts. Paul Embury writes on Unheard, I was a eugenicist who was guilty of peddling fascism, apparently. One man stated publicly that he would personally murder me if our paths were to cross. Another implied I should be hanged from a lamppost, and a woman comedian called for my arrest. Are these tweets still up? Are they still up? Yes. still up. I thought Twitter took a dim view of personal threats. People like Julia Hartley-Brewer, Embry, and Toby Young need to be arrested for the dangerous misinformation they are spreading. So what is this dangerous information? Embry continues, others joined the bandwagon of rage with various insults and accusations, much of the language too choice to republish here. So what heinous crime had I committed to provoke such an onslaught? Well, look away now if you are squeamish. I had tweeted without comment an official statistic published by National Health Service England, which showed that there had, since the start of the pandemic, been 377 COVID-related hospital deaths involving patients who were under 60 and had no pre-existing condition. I provided within the tweet a link to the relevant data. I should state that my original tweet didn't mention the likely small number of additional deaths in non-hospital settings, but this was clarified in a follow-up tweet. The citing of this particular statistic was enough to trigger a meltdown among the pitchfork-wielding Twitterati. I was misrepresenting the data, claimed some supercilious commentators. I obviously placed no value on the lives of the elderly and disabled, others asserted. I was content to throw society's most vulnerable to the wolves. I was some horrific disciple of Joseph Mengele. Had my accusers taken a minute or so to research what I actually believed, they would have found that my views were the very opposite of those they attributed to me. I have argued, Embry writes, for some time that, as part of a more focused approach, the full resources of the state and civil society should be given over to protecting the genuinely vulnerable, no matter the financial cost, while the healthy part of the population are granted greater freedoms to live their lives. To this end, I've added my name alongside those of 700,000 others to the Great Barrington Declaration, drawn up by infectious disease epidemiologists and public health scientists concerned at the terrible costs of blanket lockdowns and calling for more targeted protection. But the baying mob didn't trouble to research these facts. They never do. For many of them, it's all about the thrill of the pursuit. I'm certain that if I had relayed the same NHS England data to fellow drinkers in my local boozer, there would have been a few raised eyebrows, perhaps a civilized debate, maybe a hint of disagreement, and then someone would have got another round in. But Britain and Twitter are, as David Cameron once observed, not the same thing. Britain is populated with normal people. Twitterland, by contrast, is filled with frothing dogmatists who lash out if someone dares disrupt their settled thinking. Of course, their unrestrained fury masks their own insecurities. People often become angry when they are confronted with evidence which makes them less sure of their own arguments. C'est la vie. We must deal in what is real, not what makes us feel better, and we must be prepared to stand up for truth. My tweet was accurate and verifiable. Indeed, the wider media has now started to report the data. Facts are facts, and that doesn't change just because some people find them inconvenient. We had a similar situation in Canada where a Conservative MP was pilloried for stating that the number of people in the province of Alberta, this was a couple of weeks ago, who had died of COVID-19, at that time the number for the whole province was something like 500, who had no pre-existing conditions, and most of the people were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pre-existing conditions. The number was something like 11. Oh, this was gross misinformation. No, it's not gross misinformation. And again, if the public health authorities really wanted to come to the benefit of people, they would point out that perhaps the most serious comorbidity that one could have if one contracts COVID-19 is obesity, particularly morbid obesity. So that is to say, if you are terrified of COVID-19 and you are fat, start losing weight. Now, there's, as they used to say, news you can use. Rob Slane writes on Conservative Woman. This year has seen what looks like the birth of a new religion. Let's call it COVIDianity. It has its prophets, Neil Ferguson, its priesthood of experts, e.g. Whitty and Valence, its own soteriology, e.g. the vaccine of salvation, its evangelists, e.g. Piers Morgan, its own eschatology, e.g. the new normal, and of course its heretics, anyone questioning the data or the narrative. Not everyone who has adopted the bizarre practices of COVIDianity is a COVIDian. Many have been cowed into it somewhat unwillingly, many have been bamboozled into it somewhat unwittingly, and many others just do not seem to have thought through what is being done to them, much less whether it is right, necessary, and proportionate. But there are definitely true COVIDians, and you can recognize them by their insistence that all bow down to their cult, and that those who refuse should be shamed. In one sense, this religion has come upon us at warp speed. There we all were, going about our business at the start of the year, not suspecting that there would be anything particularly out of the ordinary in 2020, then wham. Yet in another sense, many of the ingredients were already in place long before this year, and they were simply brought together in one large melting pot to produce a toxic brew of fear, hysteria, and irrationality on an epic scale, writes Rob Slane. He continues, those ingredients include a society that had abandoned belief in the triune God and hadn't quite managed to find a replacement to fill the void. A society obsessed with safetyism and the general sterilization of life. A society glued to the propaganda box in the corner of the room with millions hanging on every word that proceeds from it as if it were the very oracle of God. A society that had, by and large, utterly forgotten what freedom means. What this has given us is a society seeking an arche, first principle, to hold everything together, one trying to stave off death by eliminating every potential risk, one that looks unquestioningly to the government, the media, and assembled experts to tell them how to do this, and one that has proved itself willing to give up freedoms won through blood, sweat, and tears centuries ago to achieve it. In short, we have arrived at the planned technocratic oligarchy that C.S. Lewis warned us of over half a century ago. Quote, the new oligarchy must more and more base its claim to plan us on its claim to knowledge. If we are to be mothered, mother must know best. This means they must increasingly rely on the advice of scientists, till in the end the politicians proper become merely the scientists' puppets. Technocracy is the form to which a planned society must tend. And here's U.S. President Dwight Eisenhower saying much the same thing in his farewell address in 1961. Quote, yet in holding scientific research and discovery in respect as we should, we must also be alert to the equal and opposite danger that public policy could itself become the captive of a scientific technological elite, unquote. Sound familiar? The irony of all that has happened this year is that in our apparent attempt to eliminate risk, we have given up our lives. That is, we have placed apparent safety so high up on the list of priorities that it has become a god, governing how we are to live, breathe, and have our being. And it so dominates our everyday lives that it makes normal life impossible, sucking out joy, meaning, and purpose. It is, as Lewis said, a tragic way to live. Now I care far more about how humanity lives than how long. Progress for me means increasing goodness and happiness of individual lives. For the species, as for each man, mere longevity seems to me a contemptible idea. One can understand how people in a plague situation would accept the suspension of normal life for a time, since you don't mess about with an illness that wipes out something like 60% of the population. But for a coronavirus with an infection fatality rate of about 0.2 to 0.26%, for a virus which has caused deaths as a proportion of the population to return to levels not seen since 2000, and yes, I know that COVIDian logicians will claim that the deaths are not higher because we did all that weird stuff like shutting down the country and wearing bizarre face gear and making sure we didn't sing loudly and so on. Then again, COVIDian logic claims a lot of things which aren't true, and the fact is there is no evidence whatsoever to show that these measures had any effect in terms of altering mortality rates. For the illusion of safety, a mess of pottage, we have sold the heritage and the liberties that were bequeathed to us by those who have gone before, which it was our duty to preserve for those who are to come. Edmund Burke wrote, society is indeed a contract. It is a partnership in all science, a partnership in all art, a partnership in every virtue and in all perfection. At the ends of such a partnership cannot be obtained in many generations. It becomes a partnership not only between those who are living, but between those who are living, those who are dead, and those who are to be born. We betrayed our ancestors and our descendants, and the idea that we will just get these liberties back is a woeful misunderstanding of how the world works. First, human nature being what it is, those in power who have developed a taste for authoritarianism rarely like to give it up. And second, liberties take centuries of long, hard work to grow up, but can be hacked down in a short time, as has happened to us in 2020. Unfortunately, there is no magic formula for reinstating them speedily. Having said that, perhaps there is still time, perhaps there's still a window of opportunity for us to step back from the brink of this absurd medical tyranny with its false promises of safety and instead embrace life and freedom. Perhaps, but Blair Nathan follows me on Twitter, and I follow him, and we frequently communicate via that platform or publisher, as might be. He had a different view, and I think there's a lot to it. He was commenting on comments I'd made yesterday on disrupt text. He says the discussion of the disrupt text movement aimed at removing various problematic classics from literary curricula of how female today's petty tyranny is. In the grand scheme of things, it's all good and well to talk about cultural Marxism or big business as sources of our state ideology, but you really can't discount the eternal schoolmarm as the consummate enabler and enforcer of these doctrines. Yes, I think this is true. The monstrous regimen of women. All this talk about liberty, I don't think that women really care much about that, to be honest. I think they care more about security. I think they care more about status. I think they care more about lecturing others about what they are doing wrong in all sorts of ways. Standing out against a consensus is one of the greatest sins to the female mind. And I think that in 2020, we have seen feminine power assert itself in a way that we have never seen before, certainly in modern times. Will Jones writes at Lockdown Skeptics, if the new COVID-19 strain is more transmissible, why isn't it taking over in every region? Because things, I suppose that would be my answer. Will Young writes, this is a real question that needs answering. Is it a real question that needs answering? I could refer again to the 2020 presidential election. Was there widespread voting fraud in so-called battleground states which went typically by tiny margins to Joseph Robinette Biden Jr.? No, that's not a real question that needs answering, which is what we're told again and again and again. Any claims of electoral fraud, no matter how vast or even fantastic, are completely irrelevant. Let's see, fact check. Oh, yes. The skeptics of the skeptics have appeared. Leo Benedictus penned a fact check entitled, Can We Believe the Lockdown Skeptics? And this piece apparently definitively discredits lockdown skeptics. Unusually, it actually makes some effort to be kind to skeptics and says we must not dismiss the lockdown skeptics' claims out of hand. Messrs. Hitchens, Cummins, and Dr. Yaden all say that we should base our views on evidence, and on that we agree with them. However, on the overwhelming balance of the evidence, their claims are wrong. And it lists several papers here. Let's take a closer look at them. Will Young writes, the June Nature paper is by Flaxman et al., and it is model-based by the same team from Imperial College. Yes. William Briggs discussed this yesterday, and I talked about it. Let's have a model that says this is going to happen. So you pour in to your model all the data points that say this is going to happen, and guess what the result is? This is going to happen. The very same thing I said was going to happen before my model. Now, Neil Ferguson's model as to the number of deaths in the United Kingdom because of COVID-19 is outrageously wrong. What's his response to that? Oh, the lockdowns and the masks and the social distancing. That's what made the difference. This is an argument, as Karl Popper would have said, that cannot be falsified. Any possible deviation from the model is explained by something else. Let's see, the July British Medical Journal paper is by Islam et al., and it is also model-based. The Lancet paper by Vincetti et al., that he then cites by way of riposte, only looks at Italy and only at case numbers, not deaths. Yes, if we're going to refer to the models, then the argument's over right from the very beginning, because the models predict every possible variant, regardless of what measures are taken. And I was taught a long time ago that the more that a hypothesis attempts to explain, the less useful it is. However, the climate change, climate emergency, climate extinction hypothesis explains everything. Temperatures getting warmer, it's climate emergency. Temperatures getting colder, climate emergency. More violent storms, climate emergency. Fewer violent storms, climate emergency. Well, you get the drill. Okay, 5 reasons not to close schools. I don't know. Teachers want to be paid for not going to school. I mean, that's a major reason not to bring back in-person instruction. I was talking about the so-called Nightingale hospitals yesterday, and there's more on this from Will Young, Lockdown Skeptics. I read fascinated that the government is dismantling Nightingale hospitals. This, despite rising cases, admissions, and above all, SAGE's assertions about the hazard posed by the increased transmissibility of the VUI 2020-12/01 variant. Support that so-called mutant virus. Support for the view that the variant really is more transmissible came yesterday from PHE's finding that it infected 15% of a case's contacts as opposed to 9.8% for the classical virus. We know that even without the mutant virus, around 10 to 20% of reported hospital cases with COVID-19 caught it there, whether consequentially or not. Some hospitals have seen much larger outbreaks. The NHS adds that these so-called nosocomial cases to total daily totals as admissions, even though the patients weren't admitted with COVID-19. If the variant is to spread 50 to 70% more efficiently, you expect it to do it in hospitals, even with the best of infection control efforts by frontline staff. I posed the question of whether this was happening due to the hospitals in the Daily Mail a week ago, along with the now answered one about household contacts. Since which answer came there none. I'm thinking that it's going to take nothing less than a wide. I don't see any other way out of this, because if our leaders can get away with ruining our lives, panicking us all to death, destroying society, destroying the economy, and apparently, parliamentary means of whatever sort have proved to be, to use the medical terminology, not efficacious. So I suspect that some form of color revolution or the like will be necessary. And finally, on this topic, let's check up with Alex Berenson. He writes, from a reader, a painful story. Here's how we got to 340,000 reported COVID deaths. I'll point out here, Joe Biden, of course, said it was going to be 400,000. There's 1 day left. I suppose it's possible for 60,000 people to die reportedly of COVID in 1 day, but that hardly seems likely. Don't expect the media to call Biden out on a prediction that it turns was rather outrageously wrong. Isolation killed his mom, who had dementia but was otherwise healthy until she was hospitalized for UTI and denied human contact. COVID is on her death certificate. Nobody should die alone. Someone had asked, would you accept an appointment at 2:30 a.m. to get the vaccine if a 24-hour rollout was arranged? Hell yeah, I would, says Daniel W. Dresner. And Elizabeth Spears responded, me too, and I'd be excited about just leaving the effing house. Berenson comments, unbelievable but true. Some people still are afraid to leave their houses, hoping this syndrome is confined to blue checks. Marty Schladen tweeted, 60% of Ohio nursing home staff refusing COVID-19. Berenson says, wow, I can't see any reason that nursing home staff would be more likely to refuse the vaccine than the general population. If anything, they'd be less likely. The hard sell has failed. Again, from Berenson, the problem for public health types is that even if the vaccine actually works better and has fewer side effects than everything else they have forced on us this year, they have no credibility left. People will insist on a slow rollout and plenty of time to judge side effects. Yashir Ali, who does not in reality look anything like his Twitter avatar, which has managed to make him roughly, 3,000 times better looking. He tweeted this, and he has the blue tick. I'm just going to say what needs to be said. We need to put a lesbian in charge of vaccine distribution. Just a reminder, Yashir Ali, New York Magazine, HuffPost contributor. He's got 718,000 followers on Twitter. Berenson comments, fact checked. The year in review from Berenson. Yep, by April 6th, the real threat was over. New York City's experience made clear that even at its worst, SARS-CoV-2 couldn't overrun hospitals or disrupt society. Everything since has been public health theater at massive cost and conscious efforts to pump death counts. And the theater hasn't mattered. The US, Europe, and South America have converged in terms of deaths, lockdowns, and masks be damned. East Asia has remained an outlier for reasons that remain unclear. Meanwhile, COVID accounts for less than 3% of deaths worldwide this year. And keep in mind, this is even with the stats being juked. Only 20% of Pfizer doses in Ontario, Canada have been used. Looks like the vaccine side effect problem is solving itself. Yes, please offer them to nursing home residents where they should have gone in the first place. So let's go back to the chat here. Let's see. What's the number for transmission via eyeball anyway? Says Coachalango. Do you remember back in the spring when we were warned against touching our faces? And I thought, so are we supposed to wear surgical gloves then? Surgical gloves could become contaminated. People touch their faces all the time. This is at the point where a line should have been drawn under this. This is stupid and totalitarian. Yes, I'm going to continue to scratch my forehead or scratch my chin or, make this pose or whatever. If stopping the spread of this disease means we all have to stop touching our faces, well, then I guess the disease has won, hasn't it? What's his name? Inventor of the net. Berners-Lee? Is that his name? It comes to mind. Kevin's not a lefty, says Tricky. Who was saying that I was a lefty? Okay. Professor Paul says, how come KMG doesn't have a blue check mark? I don't know. I didn't start using Twitter until the second half of 2015. That might have something to do with it. They were handing out these blue tick marks pretty promiscuously in the past. But no, To ask the question is to answer it. Hammett Kelly sir said, have you thought of wearing one of your solid jackets rather than a patterned one? It seems to affect the reception, but I could be wrong. I can't imagine why. I've mostly worn solid jackets. Tricky Who says coffee and tea is fine as long as there are no creamers, calories. Yeah, I just drink plain tea in the Russian fashion. And I don't know. I mean, at first it seemed like a sacrifice, but then it hit me that if you're shoveling milk, cream plus sugar into your tea or into your coffee for that matter, you're not really tasting the drink that you're supposed to be drinking. Are you? Have you found a place to live? Says Virtual Doc Purple Heart. No, I have not done so. Not yet. Bandwidth hogs. We're talking about hunger here. So much could be done if people simply went back to 3 or preferably 2 meals a day. Here's a tip that I learned from Dennis Mangan, or what does he call him? He calls himself PD Mangan now. That is to say, you lose weight for the time that you don't eat, and sleeping counts. And there's a bonus there. If you get up and, maybe do some exercise, maybe even go for a walk or walk to work or something like that, and you can manage to put off, your first meal of the day till 11:30 or 12, then this makes a big, big difference, because a lot of people are in a habit of getting up and immediately shoving cereal down their throat or whatever, which I stopped doing that a long time ago, because I noticed that it felt like there was a cannonball in my stomach, and immediately I wanted to go back to sleep. So if I had any kind of job that involved thinking, then eating a bowl of breakfast cereal in the morning was not a good idea. What else do we have here? Okay, transmission by eyeball. Yes, apparently that was the most dangerous route. You remember when we were told in the spring that coronavirus lives on metal surfaces for 9 days? As I said at the time, if that is the case, then everyone is going to be infected in short order. It's been suggested that this more transmissible virus, the so-called mutant virus, might be a good thing for the reason that it would bring about herd immunity. And there is no evidence that it is more dangerous than the plain old classic virus. I want to talk about the panopticon, which is a concept, I believe, developed by Jeremy Bentham, who is a madman. And the panopticon is the ultimate in surveillance. Let me read from Wikipedia. The panopticon is a type of institutional building and a system of control designed by the English philosopher and social theorist Jeremy Bentham in the 18th century. The concept of the design is to allow all prisoners of an institution to be observed by a single security guard, although it is physically impossible for the single guard to observe all the inmates' cells at once. The fact that the inmates can know when they are being watched means that they are motivated to act as though they are being watched at all times. Honda, with an inspection house at its center. From the center, the manager or staff of the institution are able to watch the inmates. Bentham conceived the basic plan as being equally applicable to hospitals, schools, sanatoriums, and asylums. But he devoted most of his efforts to developing a design for a panopticon prison. It is his prison that is most widely meant by the term panopticon. And this is interesting here. You see, prison, a place where increasingly we have no privacy, and the World Economic Forum is low privacy either. the automobile has been a place where people have gone to be alone, because I suppose it's one of the few places where you can be alone these days. But Volvo, the Swedish car manufacturer, has a plan to do away with that. This is a story from Fast Company. Cars have become safer for drivers, but pedestrians have paid the price. Volvo wants to change that. According to a detailed database of tens of thousands of car crashes that Volvo has been keeping since the 1970s, who gets hurt in car crashes is changing and is forcing the company to rethink what car safety means. I have never been a driver. I've been a pedestrian my entire life. Occasionally, I've gone through periods of using public transportation and very occasionally taxis, but mostly I walk everywhere. I have learned through bitter experience to treat all drivers on the road or moving off the road or moving onto the road as if they are insane, evil, and blind, that you simply cannot trust them to look to the right and the left before they drive into a street. And this is my advice to all pedestrians, even if they are not pedestrians for a very long period in the day. Cars crash. Nate Berg writes in Fast Company, people get hurt. This is the reality of a world built around 2-ton vehicles that can travel at high speeds. But according to a detailed database of tens of thousands of car crashes in Sweden that Volvo has been keeping since the 1970s, who gets hurt in these crashes is changing. It's forcing the automaker to rethink what car safety means. Because a lot of the development in the past years has led to a lot safer car-to-car crashes. People don't get injured as often when a car crashes with another car. One study comparing crashes in car models from the 1980s against those from the 2010s found that the newer cars had a 22% lower risk of injury and a 66% lower risk of death. When it comes to car crash injuries today, car-to-pedestrian and car-to-cyclist crashes are taking up a larger portion of the database. Volvo's goal is to design car safety features that can better protect pedestrians and cyclists, including everything from auto braking technology that detects people, as well to other cars, to still nascent systems for nudging drivers into avoiding driving behavior that could be dangerous to people on the road who aren't protected by the cage of a car's steel frame. So Volvo wants your cars to spy on you. This is from volvocars.com, their official website. A million more. With new and existing safety features, we are determined to save a million more lives. Speed cap. To send a strong signal about the dangers of speeding, we reduced the top speed of all our new cars to 112 miles per hour in 2020. We are also looking at how smart speed control and geofencing technology could automatically limit speeds near schools and hospitals in the future. Driver monitoring cameras. To help address intoxication and distraction in traffic, we are working on new in-car solutions. Driver monitoring cameras, together with other sensors, will allow the car to intervene when a clearly intoxicated or distracted driver risks serious injury or death. Highway pilot. With support from LiDAR sensors, the next generation of Volvo cars will be hardware ready for autonomous drive. And over time, we will push out over-the-air software updates to provide fully autonomous highway driving. Care Key. We recently introduced the Care Key aimed at addressing speeding. With the Care Key, Volvo car owners can put a speed cap on the car when lending it to a younger family member or less experienced driver as a way of ensuring a safer ride. I don't know, before 2020, it was my opinion that Americans in particular would never put up with self-driving cars because a lot of Americans love driving their cars. After 2020, all bets are off. But here's a prediction for you. All of these systems are going to be commandeered by the government or various governments. The government will decide that there's too many people going downtown, so they won't let your car go down. Or the government will decide that there's too many people leaving downtown for the outlying areas of a city or the suburbs, and they will prevent your car from leaving. This has political implications as well. So there's a protest, an anti-government protest. Well, your cars will be programmed so you can't go where the protests are. that if you're in the suburbs and you want to go to the city, you won't be allowed to go to the city, and vice versa. This is the thin end of the wedge, and of course it is being sold to us on the basis of safety. I was rather surprised in recent years when I read several places that apparently one of the reasons that led people to elect Donald Trump president in 2016 is that an increasing number of people are fed up with the computerization of their car for two reasons. It makes it impossible for them to fix their own cars, do maintenance work on it. 3, it's very expensive. 2, it's very expensive. And 3, drivers are battling attempts by computer chips within their car to take over the driving. And often these decisions that the computer is making are perhaps not the best ones. Final look at the chat. Okay, the net was invented by the devil. Possible. You know, in the Peter Cook Dudley Moore movie, Bedazzled about the devil, a very sad sort of English devil, played by Peter Cook laments, the last great idea I had was advertising, which is pretty funny when you think of it. Okay, and finally, I got to close this here. Okay. The control grid is real, says Pearl's letting agency. Tricky Who says autonomous armed drones are just waiting for their 5G system. Child forgot her mask and zzzt. Autonomous, nobody to complain to. We've already got these autonomous machines working in grocery stores. Do we not? Oh, yes, I saw this video. Did you see, Gamian says, did you see a group of cyclists attack a car on Fifth Avenue with an old person inside? Yes, I did see this. And the question was raised by this video. Hundreds of thousands of people, over 500,000 people have left New York City, with more to come. And at some point, they're going to be asked, or, de Blasio, or Governor Death is going to demand that they come back, or else they're sissies or something. What is New York doing? Eliminating cash bail? Just a catch and release program for violent criminals of the very worst of the 1960s, 70s, and 80s? Why would people want to return to that, especially given the grotesque level of taxation that people who live in New York City live under? In Arizona, where most people never walk, says Gamion, was it? I heard a song years ago. Only a loser rides the bus in LA, something like that. I have never. Well, I lived in San Diego, where you can get around by bus, but it is an ordeal. You don't want to do that. Not in San Diego. Actually, Edmonton was kind of like that. Years ago, I read a statistic that something like 92% of people in Edmonton get to work by car. They have extended their rapid transit there, so I suspect that has fallen. Love a good ham and egg sandwich, says Tricky Woo, as do I. But again, I'll just say that, you are losing weight while you sleep. And if you get up and you don't immediately, put several hundred calories into your body, or what these big sweet lattes, don't they have as much as like 800, 900 calories in them? Best avoided. Best avoided. And, if you just have a plain coffee, of course, caffeine is an appetite suppressant. That's what poor people in India do. They drink hot tea. It has two purposes. One, it produces sweat, which cools them. And 2, the caffeine tricks them into thinking that they are not hungry. So that is the show for today. It's Theater Thursday tomorrow. And I will be discussing a film from France from 1969 called Manouche Mode. or My Night at Maud's by Eric Romer. And on the book club on Friday, I'm going to be discussing a work of philosophy by Richard Weaver, a man very important in American right-wing thinking from 1948, Ideas Have Consequences. I will be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you like the show or any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so already. If you would like to support this live stream with a donation, very much appreciated, especially at this time of great uncertainty in my life and a time when I cannot give you people proper throughput because of the rubbish Wi-Fi that I'm stuck with here. You can make a donation to PayPal through the address Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. It's funny, though, I'm looking at the physical representation here, and it's probably about the most natural that it has ever been. Again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. For PayPal, if you're Canadian, you can send a donation via Interac at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And I will leave you, as always, with this: in these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear listeners and viewers, manage to form a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.